Welcome back, everyone, to the Chip Lunch podcast. I'm very excited to be in your ear holes or in your eye holes. Whether you're listening to us on YouTube, or watching on YouTube is ear holes. No.
Oh dear.
That's not right. Eye holes would be... No, because YouTube would be both.
YouTube would be both.
It would be both. YouTube is... If you're watching us on YouTube, hello. Check us out in your ear holes and eye holes. And if you're listening to us on our favourite podcast app...
Sound like a granddad or something.
just ranting.
On the radio.
Now, welcome back.
Coming straight through the...
Welcome back to the Chip Lunch podcast.
Straight through the AM.
Yes, straight. AM radio.
Yeah.
Welcome, Brandon. How are you?
Thank you.
It's nice to have you.
Even better now that I'm with you.
And also in people's ear holes and eye holes.
Look, we'll come back to that.
Okay, cool. Do you want to introduce our guest? I'm very excited to have her on the podcast.
Sure thing.
Please.
Welcome to Louisa.
Thank you.
Hi.
Good to be here.
Good to see you. Now, you just came in from an important phone call.
Yes.
Is there anything you can report on that phone call, or was it just a standard meeting?
Highly confidential. Cannot reveal on this podcast. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah. It's like we had Amelia on the podcast, and basically we found out that she was a spy. So maybe spy tinks.
I think that's got to top my one.
Yeah. Okay.
Spy business is serious.
Yeah. Very. Oh, yours wasn't serious, just confidential.
Yeah, just confidential.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Louisa.
Good to be here.
It's really cool that you make the trip out from now. Do you live in Ryde or do you live close to Ryde?
Close to Ryde. I'm in a suburb called Epping.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Caught the train there.
Yeah. I drove. Train would be a long journey.
It's a long trip.
It's a long journey.
I don't know why I went to Epping. I think it was something that my kids and I just decided we were going to do.
Oh.
Catch a train to Epping.
There's nothing to do there.
Well, my son, well, see, okay, I'm glad that you said that because my son had seen it. I said, mate, I'm remembering now, pick a station on the train map and we'll go there. He's like, Epping. Like,
I think I know. I think
So
I know
we did
why though, because it's one of those stations that trains terminate. So
yes.
You'd hear it a lot.
Yeah.
It's just like Hornsby, you'd hear it a lot because
That's a good point.
trains terminate there.
Yeah. But when we got off there, I'm like, let's go for a walk around. There wasn't much to do in Epping.
100%. There's nothing to do there.
Really?
It's just a big area where people change trains. It's close to some other really nice suburbs like Macquarie Park, Eastwood, where there's good food. But Epping itself, I don't know. There's not that much to do there. So
Okay. You spend most of your time out of Epping than in Epping?
Well, I used to live in Eastwood.
Okay.
Then I moved out and now I'm at Epping. So yeah, it's still relatively close to everything that I normally do. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. You feel nervous coming on the podcast? A lot of people say they feel nervous, but they don't really need to.
I think it's exciting nervous.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because I've never been on a podcast.
Hey.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, this whole mic setup and tech setup, it's pretty cool.
Oh. Thank you. I was funny, you were saying, I've never been on a podcast. I'm like, oh, really? And like most people have never been on a podcast before.
No.
That's cool. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out. Here's the first question that we always like to ask on Chip Lunch. How do you like to eat your hot chips?
Yeah, so I thought about this question before jumping on here.
The most important question.
I think for myself, right, like chips, let's just get serious here. Like it can be a snack or it can be a meal.
Drew?
Yes,
I agree with that.
So for snack, I know this is going to have a lot of hate, but this is just how I eat my chips.
This is great.
Yeah.
As a snack, I don't have it with anything. I like it with nothing.
No salt.
Nothing.
When I go to Macca's, like a little hack for you all, if you want them to cook it fresh, like for you, you say no salt because they default salt everything. So if you say no salt, it's guaranteed to come out hot and crispy and just awesome.
Wow, I'm surprised they would give you that option.
Yeah, so you just like remove the salt. It's an option.
That's so interesting.
Like when you order it.
Yeah, when you order it, you just go like no salt, and then they have to cook a fresh batch because they salt everything that they serve that's already been cooked.
They chuck it in
I feel like the warming thing they put it in though would have residue, salt.
Yes, so they have to cook it and then basically like serve your.
And then give it straight to you. There you go.
I feel bad for the 15-year-old that's having to
I
do
feel
that.
bad, but that's how I like my chips.
You
So
that's how Louisa rolls, man.
That's how I roll.
Big baller.
For a meal though, I don't know if you guys know about poutine.
Yes. Yes.
That is hands down the best way to eat chips.
Yeah.
Hot chips, in my opinion.
I've heard Braden mention poutine before.
Yeah.
Please engage us in some poutine chat between the two of you because I don't really know much about it. So you start, Louisa, and
Well,
then
it's a
Braden
Canadian
responds.
Canadian snack.
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered it when I lived in Canada for 6 months on exchange.
Oh, making a note for that.
Where in Canada were you living?
I was living in a city called London, Ontario.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very small town,
Yeah.
but it's also the town where Justin Bieber was born. So it's not all that unknown. Fun fact for you there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a Canadian snack.
Yeah.
Hot chips, cheese curd, gravy,
Yeah.
all
Gravy?
in one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so good. But it's like a meal. It's
Yeah.
not really a snack. It's
So
kind of
like
a
I'll
meal.
get a poutine for lunch.
Well, yeah, it's generally like a pile.
It's a big pile with cheese curd, gravy, smash on top.
Really? And what's the difference between cheese and cheese curd?
I think it's just the type of
Cheese.
It's mozzarella, I think.
Oh,
Or at least it's some kind of
mortadella. Is that what they-
mozzarella.
Yeah,
Some
no.
kind of melting cheese, but
I'm going to look up cheese curd.
it's like a squeaky cheese, you know what I mean when I
yeah.
say that?
Oh, squeaky cheese.
Yeah, like it's not something like super like cheddar or something like super sharp.
Oh, cheese curds are moist pieces of curdled milk,
So good.
Yeah.
which doesn't sound appealing. But
Oh,
then
it's good.
also when you're
It's so
saying
good.
like obviously it melts on
Yeah.
the chips
Yeah.
And the gravy.
and the
Oh,
gravy.
So good.
The problem is
gonna
the
have to
thing
try
with poutine though is you need to get in early because
Yep.
the sog factor
Yes.
starts
Yeah,
coming in very
100%.
quickly.
Yep.
You know the last bit of it is going to be a potato gravy soup
Yeah,
by
I
the
wouldn't
time you
like
get
that,
to the end. But the start, if
But
you
the
get in
chips are
early,
crispy.
yeah,
yeah, that sounds pretty good.
yeah.
Yep. So good. Well, I have a question for Braden because not many people know about poutine. How
Yeah.
did you find out about poutine?
I don't know, just like being alive. I haven't been to Canada.
What are you saying about Joel?
I'm saying he
I'm
hasn't lived a full life yet.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's
But
right.
he'll get there.
Big calls.
I'm bored to death.
I don't know. I haven't been to Canada, so.
We've
I
been
don't know.
to America a fair bit though.
Yes, I've been.
Because apparently cheese curds are also popular in Pacific Northwest and
Yeah.
including like Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Well,
So-
yeah, Wisconsin's where I know a bunch of cheese curds get made. Well, that's like Green Bay and stuff,
okay.
all the cheeseheads, whatever. But
yeah, that makes sense.
I want to go to Canada. Canada's kind of next for me, especially World Cup. Next World Cup is Canada, US, and Mexico.
Yeah,
I feel like
2026.
that's my aim.
Ooh.
That's my aim is, and also yeah,
Nice.
I've got a couple of my favorite bands are from Toronto, so I'd really like to go
Oh, which bands are
to
they?
Toronto. City in Colour, Alexis on Fire.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got a good hardcore scene. Also in Buffalo, Every Time I Die.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know any of those bands.
Neither.
I wouldn't expect you to.
That's really cool though that you've brought up poutine. Because it sounds
Yeah.
like if you're saying it's a mess towards the end,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be better as a snack?
Well, it's just the size. Like
It
you
comes
don't
like
get
that
a
much.
small poutine. I
Yeah,
feel
no,
like.
no such thing.
Though I think you can get poutine from Macca's in Canada. It's like one of those
Oh,
things.
that-
It's like
That would
like getting
surprise me.
a beer from Macca's in Italy.
Oh yeah, I've tried that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, have you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good.
The
It's
thing
the
that
strangest thing.
disappointed me about Macca's in Europe though is it was like the same price as going to a restaurant. Like I feel like
Oh,
because
is it?
the restaurants are so much cheaper, like you could go and get good food for the same price that Macca's was.
Right.
That's my tip anyway.
Yeah.
If you're in Italy.
This is Braden's travel diaries. It's great.
It's great.
Now, we should ask the next question, which
Yes.
some people would say, Braden, is the most important question. You seem to think. I've just realised the lights are wrong on the set, but
Yeah, what is this?
What's
It's
wrong with the
very-
lights?
sorry, I'll
very
change.
mood
It's
lighting.
not the chip lunch colours. We'll change them. We'll change them in a second. Where was I going with that?
I think
Oh,
you were
you said
moving
that.
on
You
to
said the most important question is on the chips, but I think because I am extra holy, that I think the most important question is Louisa. I was not going to ask you, Braden, if you want. We've already asked
Okay,
you.
yeah, okay.
Louisa, how did you?
I did have a quick thing. I did have at youth at commitments we were hanging out, and one of the boys asked me how I became a Christian, and I went to answer, and then one of the other boys then told me how I became a Christian
Really?
because he had listened
Was it accurate?
to
Cool.
one of the podcasts.
Was it
So,
accurate?
Yeah, it was fairly accurate.
Oh, that's pretty
Yeah.
good.
I was like, well,
He's like, you've been listening, haven't you?
yeah, exactly.
Do we need to get him on the podcast?
Maybe.
Look at that. Changing
yeah.
the colors on your phone.
It's very cool.
I'm sure could have just edited the colours different.
Oh,
Is that the
that's-
Philips?
To set him more challenges.
Philips lights?
These are the Philips Hue lights.
Ooh, I use that at home.
Do you?
I
What
do.
What color do you usually like to have
Do you
on
have a
at
full
home?
gamer setup with all the lights?
Nah,
and the
no,
light
no.
up keyboard? No.
No, it's
Oh.
the bedroom lights that
Ah.
are controlled by Hue. So usually it's just the boring white or
Oh.
yellow.
I thought you were like going like green and.
I feel like this is more purple than pink.
Oh, I'm
Normally
sorry.
We're more pink, aren't
Okay,
we? On the,
yeah,
on that
I'll go
side?
back to that. Anyway, I don't want to. I don't want to denigrate the answer to this by doing this at the same time as.
Well, it's only the
Is that
important things.
better?
I'm
No.
sure all the people that aren't watching on YouTube are really enjoying this.
Well, yeah.
That's
check
too
it out.
purple. That's too purple. Come
What
on.
about this?
Come
Is
on.
that better?
Come on.
Oh,
Ah.
It's
that's-
blue now.
That's too blue.
Ooh.
Thanks for that.
Oh yeah.
There
Here we
you
go.
That's
There you go.
better. All right,
Nice.
Cool. All right. Let's ask
Cool.
the most important question.
How I became a Christian.
Oh,
Let me kick you off.
How did you know?
So first exposure to church was towards the latter end of primary school.
Mm.
I kind of just followed mum along, and brother came along as well. And it was, for me, just lots of, participating in crafts and free food and something to do on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Then I kind of got into high school and was this kind of same kind of thing, just following along, playing the games, eating the food. Didn't really have much of an interest, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was just hanging out with other kids, outside of school.
mhm.
And then I think I fast tracked to probably year 10, where I got introduced into a youth group
Yeah.
at church. Kind of didn't want to be there because it was like a Friday night, and I was like, I got better ways to spend my time. But I started getting along with the other youth there, and then kind of found it a bit fun, and still didn't really take it too seriously. There was Bible study, there was games, all of that stuff, which I participated in. It wasn't really until year 12 where I was, you have HSC, and then you really start thinking about how you're spending your time, like, should I be spending every Friday night here when everyone else is gone to have some fun or study?
Mhm.
And so I started thinking about whether I should be around on Friday nights. So I know I'm saying with a smile, but it was really like a serious, what am I doing here? If this is real, then I should probably take it more seriously. If it's not real, I should probably figure that out and then get myself out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my approach. But as I started to think about whether, God was real, whether what the Bible was saying was real, I had other big questions that I started thinking about, things along the lines of why there's suffering, why are we here, why do we even exist, how did the world come about, all these large, big questions that, some might say is a bit of an existential crisis. I started thinking about, but it was all just triggered by why am I at church? Why am I coming to this?
Yeah.
Spending time reading in this book that may or may not be true.
Mm.
So I started asking a lot of questions. Fortunately, had a very patient youth leader
Yeah.
and youth pastor who entertained all my questions or pointed me to resources that, could shed a bit of light on what I was thinking about. And yeah, that was a whole big journey of just thinking through different things in life and trying to get answers to those, and also just looking at what the Bible said about different things and kind of sense checking whether I thought that made any sense. And so yeah, there was a lot of apologetic stuff that I went through and just figuring out, is this true? And so that was quite a bit of a journey. I ended up going to youth group for the entire year 12 because I just felt like the more I asked, the more there was to talk about and there was more to think about. And it was, if anything, I was like, even if this is not true, this is a really good way to think about life. Just think through the hard questions and get what people's thoughts were, what this Bible had to say as well. So I stuck around and then got into first year uni, and for some reason also got pulled into leading a youth group and continued basically asking those questions. And I reached a point where I could not deny that. I guess I went through a phase of figuring out like faith and truth. And I landed at a point where you can't prove everything like scientifically or to a T, because it then wouldn't be faith. It would be fact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of reached a crossroad where I asked myself, well, is this more likely to be true or more likely not to be true based on what I've already discovered, all the conversations I've had, what I'm reading in the Bible. And I reached a point where I'm like, I think there's more evidence that there is a God than that it might be false.
Yeah.
And so I committed to continue discovering that at around first year university, and decided to commit my life to Jesus as well in that year and got baptized. And then it's just been, a journey since then in terms of discovering more about God, discovering more about the Bible. So that's like kind of the short story of it. Yes.
No, this is why I like doing the podcast.
Absolutely.
That's
Where
really
did you
cool.
grow up?
I was born and raised here. So grew up here, always been in the area of Ryde. So I did my primary school, high school there, and then I went to UNSW.
Oh,
so there was a great CBS community there as well. To
CBS is
continue
Campus
going.
Bible Study?
Campus Bible Study,
cool.
yeah.
Because I didn't really participate in any, even though I was a Christian, I didn't participate in any Christian like stuff at my uni. I was just going to ask though, and it's kind of off the back of Braden's question about where did you grow up. Why did you? You said you followed your mum and brother to church. Why were they going to church?
Yeah, so actually, Mum didn't grow up a Christian. She grew up in the Philippines and then came to Australia.
Right.
And then when I was around 7, my parents separated, and somebody had brought my mum to church. And so my brother and I just followed along, because what else can you do when you're like 7 and 5 and have nowhere else to go, right? So that's how my mum actually ended up going to church in the first place, and we kind of just followed. So I didn't really have much say in it, and I think I don't want to speak for her, but she probably was looking for some reason or going through something herself, just in terms of processing the separation with my dad. And so that's how she ended up going to church. And today she's a Christian. So
that's awesome.
Praise God.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Is your dad from the Philippines as well?
No, my dad's from China. So
okay.
they met in Australia.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
So they came separately to Australia?
Correct.
Right. And did you know what their reasons were to come to Australia? Was it just like looking for something different?
Yeah, I think just for work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So both came both thinking that Australia is a better place to live. So I don't think there was any other extraordinary reason for that. I know my mum definitely came because her company from the Philippines sent her, and dad was just here. Better opportunities, I guess. Yeah. Yeah,
cool. That's again, like I was saying this about Wang's story as well, like because he's originally from Macau. I just love that it doesn't matter what walk of life that we're from. Like we're just here hanging out because of Jesus, and I think that's what's really cool about it. So you're going to church. You said that you just ended up falling into the youth group.
Yes.
And then kind of, you said you were having it seemed like you were having lots of questions about faith and stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to know more about that. I would like to know more about that, because you said there was a lot of things like you can't prove everything. Were you looking for like a real scientific reason for certain things? Like you talked about suffering and stuff like that. Is that what you were looking for at the time?
I think just being really black and white as a younger person, you kind of look for hard evidence.
An answer for everything.
An answer, exactly, an answer. And I think obviously as you grow up, you figure out everything's not black and white, it's grey. But I think as a younger person, you look for like solid facts. You know, as you're going through school, you have maths and science where like it's just right or wrong. Yeah. But then you also have subjects like English where you're like, this is just a massive discussion and no one's correct. You know?
That's what I loved.
Exactly. And so I was figuring out like, okay, like let's take school aside. Let's think about life for a second. Yeah. How does that make sense? Is it something black and white? Is it something I can try to figure out and navigate and make some sense out of it? Or is it something that's grey again? And I kind of wanted to figure out the whole like whether there's a God piece. Whether that could be something I could work out more black and white, or whether it was just, you know, something that people like blindly just believed, and it was something comforting to them, and that was it. And I kind of wanted to figure out that for myself rather than hear what people just told me, which, I mean, in youth group, it would be, this God's real. And I'm like, yep, good for you. Yeah. But then I would have friends that were, you know, atheists or of other faiths and be like, there's no God, you know? So I just wanted to go through a journey of figuring out what I thought based on what I could observe, what I could read, what I could hear. And I guess my own life experience would play into that as well. So in terms of like suffering or seeing a God at work, if anything, just trying to make sense of it all. So I think, yeah, maybe my brain is a little more wired to look for the objective facts and then go from there. So that might be one of the reasons why I was taking that kind of approach, trying to figure out whether there was anything that could be proven and going from there.
Is that something that, not just about faith, like for lots of things in your life?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I tend to start with objective facts.
Yeah.
Just because if it seems like it's the more reasonable thing to start off with, rather than go with feeling or something else.
Right. Is it because you don't want to waste your time on figuring it out?
I think that's maybe part of it. Yeah. Or I maybe feel like you could go on this like massive emotional journey, but then it was completely like just so far away from the truth or the facts.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that's probably how I'm wired. So it's not that that's the correct way. It's more just, that's just my personal way of going about things.
Is there a moment, and you talked about going through a big process, is there a moment that you can remember when you like your perspective shifted on that? So you said like, it was almost like there isn't going to be an objective answer here?
Yeah, 100%. Because every question I asked, like flat, every question I asked, which would be the hard questions, like why is there suffering, you know, all those questions. It was never a black and white answer from my pastor and my youth leader, obviously, because there's no black and white answer. And so the more questions I asked, the more I realized everything's actually really grey. However, you can form your own thought about the you know, the topic or the question after hearing, you know, multiple perspectives and their answer. So yes, I definitely
more subjective.
Yes.
For you,
yeah.
Okay.
And also just realizing like when you think about, you know, like God wanting to have a relationship, that's not something that's super black and white. It's not like you can tick a box and move on. And same thing with people, right? Like it's never black and white. It's grey. You have to work through it, and you can't just like tick a task and move on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I slowly came to that realization where this is not like maths and science completely. I think there are some things that, you know, if you look at how the world was made and just understand some like scientific facts and how like small of a chance that this all happened by random, I think there's some like facts there. And I'm like, that was part of my, you know, my journey on realizing maybe there is a God, maybe we are designed. But yeah, I think it's beyond just facts and science. It's relationships. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah, the relationship piece is really interesting because, it's like, well, I think it's interesting that you're saying you're looking for black and white answers because in essence, actually, God is a black and white answer, but everything else out of that is where all the nuance is that you're talking about. And especially in relationships, like, because we're the ones that are always being grey and nuanced with God, and he's like, I'm 100%. Black and white.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that that's what you were looking for, but you wanted it on your terms rather than on God's terms. And I think like we all do that. You're like, well, God, do this because this is what I want. And really it's like, what it sounds like is the process that you went through was like almost like a humbling thing of going, actually, God is the black and white answer, and then everything else is afterwards that's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's grey until you realize or you accept that there is a God. Yeah. Once you accept that there's a God, you kind of put yourself below that and say, okay, now what God says is the truth. But until you get to that point, I think everything's still up for grabs. Like,
Yeah.
you know, who's going to be the authority of my life? Up until knowing God, it's me, right? Because who else?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you said apologetics really helped you too. What in that aspect do you think helped you to, you know, make that decision that actually accept that God was the black and white answer?
I think a lot of the questions I asked were quite existential.
Like what? What would you ask?
Just, I know some people on the, like, who will be listening will laugh, but things, just like really random things. Like, how did the earth actually come about?
Yep.
Like, if it was by chance, then how can we have brains and we can actually have a conversation right now? Like, where does all of that come from? A lot around suffering, like, why is there suffering in the world? If there is a God, like, why does bad stuff still happen, you know?
Yeah.
And this is when I have very little understanding of, you know, sin and everything else that the Bible talks about, but it's what young people think about, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really important.
Yeah. Even things like, are there other living things outside of Earth? Like, just really...
Like aliens and stuff.
Yeah, aliens. Just the most random things. I think part of it was me just trying to test what Christians think.
Yeah.
And just throwing all these weird questions at my pastor to see how he responds. And also my youth leader. Those poor things. Very, very, very important in my journey though. And then also just seeing what the Bible actually says about a lot of these things. Sometimes there's no direct answer in the Bible, but I'd be thrown like another passage that might help how I can think about it. And I think all of that experience combined has led me to think that there is something about the Bible that is extraordinary, like beyond what any one person can just write.
Yeah. It's not someone that just wrote a story.
Yeah. And there's just far too many coincidences or, you know, things that happen that I'm like, this can't, well, I was just led to feel that this can't be chance. It can't be random. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So I noticed that you've mentioned, I think almost 3 times you've talked about your youth leaders and youth pastor. Do you feel happy to name them and tell us why they were such an impact on your life? You don't have to name them if you don't want to. If you think you're gonna.
I've had several youth leaders, and one youth pastor, his name's William. I don't know if he will actually hear this podcast, but I think...
Just send it to him.
Yeah, I might.
Then he will.
Shout out to William. Yeah, I think they were quite patient in terms of just listening to whatever questions I had. And some of them were really just wacky.
And it was like you didn't think that you would get the same amount of patience from someone else when you're asking the same questions?
I don't think necessarily thought about that, but I think they were just there at the right time and just responded in a way that I needed. Yeah. And the other thing that was, I guess, impactful, which they probably do it without realizing, is that they're modeling what is written in the Bible. And I guess that's important, because if you see people that say they believe what's in the Bible and then they don't really live out what they believe, it's then a disconnect for me, because then it would just be like, are you guys just practicing a religion without actually understanding what's behind it?
Or are you faking it? Or
exactly. Or it clearly doesn't mean much, because you're not actually behaving the way that you say is correct.
Yeah.
So
it's like an integrity thing as well.
Faith without deeds, like James.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So I saw a lot of, just a lot of kindness, a lot of patience and generosity from all those people at youth group. And I think that really helped, just what I could read and observe and put them together. Yeah.
I mean, I think like both Braden and I have both experienced that same thing too. It's like youth leadership. Braden, you do youth leadership on Friday night as well. Yeah. Just like the experience. I think also something what you're saying, Louisa, too, is that you don't realise the impact your youth leaders have on you until years later.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Yeah, and like, so I probably said before, like Jai was my youth leader, and he was I think he's like 7 or 8 years older than me, but having that someone that's slightly a little bit older than you, but they're modelling a Christian lifestyle, like you're saying, Louisa, it's like, it's really, really impactful.
People like Greaves, who's several hundred years older than me. Jared and stuff. Sorry. Any excuse to take a shot because I know he'll listen.
Oh, I love the boy.
Hey Greaves, love you.
Yep.
Yeah, like I think your friends, especially at Soli's, we're aiming to be friends and youth leaders in appropriate ways.
Yeah, friends first before anything else.
Yeah. You don't really realize until you're kind of in a peer group with them how much how much it really changes. And like I think it's something you have to remind yourself of constantly. Like, yeah, I've got a bunch of year 7 boys that are just crazy. and sometimes it's easy to get frustrated, but then you realize like, oh yeah, I was the worst when I was in year 7. Like I remember being just a 13, 14-year-old absolute drop kick. Like, so yeah, it's crazy to think how much influence you can have over them. Yeah. And you don't even realize that you're really doing it. It's really cool that God puts us in relationship in that way. And I think I love leading youth group for that reason. I think you get to have really genuine conversations sometimes, like Louisa said, if someone's interested. But I think that can also take time before things like that happen. And
integrity thing's so important too.
Yeah,
building trust. And
think about so Joel and I both come from non-Christian backgrounds as well. Like you get to know those people before you really get to know the Bible. Like if you've never come from that background, like I got to know a lot of Christians and saw how they lived before I ever really did a lot of opening the Bible for myself.
Yeah, I think that's very
really
true.
Important.
Yeah, and again, they're living that out, so you get to see the impact that the Bible is having on their lives.
Yeah.
So then they impact on your life. You're like, what's the reason?
Yeah.
And then you're reading the Bible, like again, like you said, and that's really changing your heart. So it's really cool.
I think the other cool thing about youth is that you see them regularly. You see them every Friday, right? So not only are the youth leaders pouring into the lives of the youth, but the youth leaders have their own life as well. And sometimes they're going through things. Sometimes they're also questioning things. But the beautiful thing is that the youth get to see them go through that. So, especially if that youth leader sticks with them for the 6 years that they're in high school, they will definitely see things that the youth leader goes through as well and how they approach it. And it becomes like a model. Because then when they kind of go through the same thing, they're like, oh, how did my youth leader approach that? And and then
you can have those conversations. Like I remember having conversations with dudes that are older than me when I was like, oh, should I get married to Beck? Should I propose? And having a big conversation with someone about that. And like, you've seen them go through those life stages before you, and then you can it's really nice when you have that relationship with people where you can then have those big conversations about life and about what's going on and things that you've seen them go through already, and you can as you said, like it's a really cool connection that you have if you've spent that time and invested that time in each other.
100%.
So where was the youth group at? What church was that at?
There's a church called CECA, Christ Evangelical Centre of Australia.
Okay.
It's based in Eastwood,
okay.
Next to the water fountain, for those who know Eastwood. There's a famous little water fountain.
I have to Google that.
Yes.
I think it's like the Wikipedia photo of Eastwood.
The Eastwood. If you want to put it here.
I think it's the Wikipedia.
If you want to put it here, Ak. The Eastwood water fountain.
Famous water fountain.
It's beautiful.
Is it a big one?
Nah, it's tiny.
Oh.
But it's like a centerpiece in the suburb.
It's like there's one like that in Parramatta, isn't there?
Is it?
Maybe near Parramatta. Strathfield Station. There's one, I think.
Oh yes. They're kind of similar to that. So people would just be like, "Oh, let's meet at the fountain," and everyone knows what that means.
Okay. Meet at the fountain.
Meet at the
fountain.
fountain.
Like the Trevi fountain, like some massive thing, like
it's just like
all carved out of marble.
But then it's just like this tiny.
Yeah. Infamous for like little kids just jumping in there with all the like dirty water.
Oh yeah. Do people throw coins in there?
No, because people go in as well. So it's not one of those fountains where you chuck it in and no one goes in. It's like one of the ones where little kids go in there and just play.
Oh, that's cool.
Even though it's really gross, but people do it. So there's a church in Eastwood that I went to for quite a while.
Sorry, I'm
just Googling the fountain.
Yeah, I'm Googling the fountain.
Dancing fountain.
Yeah, they said it was in Eastwood, but I don't think it was that one.
I don't think so.
So did they do the same thing that we do here at Sorrow's, lead all the way through high school? So if you'd have the same leaders, that's
well,
awesome.
that when I was in youth group, that's not how they did it. But then by the time I was leading youth group, like I took my group from year 6 to 12.
Yeah,
so I think they figured like keeping the same leader meant that they could continue building the relationship, and I think it worked out better.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what we grew up in as well. Like Soul Revival's been doing that. It was an idea they pinched from Janelli Anglican, I think, but they've been doing that for quite a while of just trying to stay friends with the crew as they start in year 7. Or I mean, I started going to youth group in year 9, but all the way up into year 12. Did you finish year 12 and then go straight back to leading? Because I just heard you.
I did, yeah. I did. Yeah. Even though I had not been baptized at that point, I think I had a level of commitment to dig into the word with people. So I figured, why not help out the younger generation? Think through the same questions as me.
Yeah. But you have a bit of passion for youth ministry, I think.
I do. I think I have a bit of passion for young people, just figuring out life. I think it can be quite challenging. So because I benefit so much from my youth leaders and my youth pastor, I was like, got to give back. You got to give back. It's got to give back.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, I think both of us have done something similar, is that, we need to go back and do what we were blessed enough or lucky enough to have.
Yeah.
So speaking of pinching ideas, favorite youth night?
Oh.
As a youth, and then favorite youth night as a leader?
Great question.
It is a great question. I think, based on what I could see from all the Soul Revival stuff, you guys definitely have way more party wild youth nights. And I really wish we did that at my youth group.
Yeah.
So I don't think a particular one jumps in mind because we were never too crazy. The only crazy
I'm not saying it has to be crazy. I just said favorite. Yeah.
It's going to be something super holy. Yeah.
Well, now I'm two minds about it because...
No, come on, just tell us your favorite night.
I think there's one night that jumps to mind. Not one when I was a youth.
Yeah.
Which was just the night that I decided to stick around. Yeah. Because there were definitely nights at youth group where I was like thinking about whether I should be spending my Friday nights here.
Yeah.
And there was one particular night. I actually can't remember what happened that night, but I do remember like telling myself, I'm gonna stick around.
Yeah.
Because this is good. And I think we were in Bible study, we're talking about generosity, I think. And just something clicked in my head. And I'm like, okay, even this is still not real, I'm sticking around.
Yeah.
So that's probably one that jumps to mind. In terms of leading youth kids, I think when they were in year 6, they were just all over the shop. Like no one would listen. They'd be chucking paper in my hoodie. Like it'd be the wildest thing. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But I think when they were in year 7 or 8, like towards like a couple of years after, I remember there was one night where I was like, wow, this is actually impacting their lives.
Yeah.
Like they're not just here to muck around. Yeah. They still do, but
they want to come.
They actually want to come and they're actually engaging with Bible study.
Had the discussion.
Yeah. And they're actually asking questions.
Yeah, I remember times like those too.
Yeah. And it was like a moment of, wow, this actually is actually benefiting.
Yeah.
It's actually worthwhile putting in my time and efforts. So.
Yeah. And I remember like you feel like, oh, we've made like a little bit of a breakthrough with a relationship, and like sometimes like one of the youth, the guys that are coming from youth, they'll ask you a question. You're like, I didn't even expect you to ask that question. So they're the moments of when you're youth leading. You're like, oh, this is really cool. And again, I didn't realize that until later. Like, I'm remembering a couple of times when that happened. I'm like, oh, really missed that.
Yeah.
Friday's always open.
I know. This guy, he's like, come on, you're going to come back and be
Joel's coming back. The minute
he'll be back.
Remy's through. Gel's coming back.
Through what?
through
Life?
youth. Yeah. Minute she's in youth, you're back. Few
Wow.
silver-haired fox. Come back.
Silver fox walking around. That's a bit weird.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Greece is a couple hundred years old.
It's never too late to come back.
That's true. There is, old Methuselah's walking around all the time. Isn't
yeah.
I love Greece.
Yeah.
You know, he and I, we came up, we were in the same year together.
Oh, really? So everything Braden is saying about Greaves being old is just as relevant.
He's an old soul.
He's
ageless.
He's just under a month older than me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
That to throw him under the bus, but anyway. Yeah. I know that you talked about first year uni, and that was you talked about campus Bible study and stuff like that. What did you decide to do at uni first of all, and then why was campus Bible study a good thing?
Yeah, I did double degree, one in finance and one in psychology, because I couldn't decide.
They're very different.
They are very different, purposefully, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was like, I'll pick one where I know will kind of be easy for me. So that was finance. It was very just straightforward. And then one that I had an interest in, just in case, I discover that I really love psychology.
Yeah.
So I decided to do that just to give me some more time to learn more about both and figure out which one I might want to work in later. Yeah. To this day, I still don't really have a firm answer, but it did the job
one
on
day,
me.
One day
it was just
you could
magically
be a financial psychologist, couldn't you? Deal with people that are addicted to money or something.
I think there's definitely areas where they blend.
Yeah.
But whether I want to, put my hand in there, don't know.
Actually, marketing actually works really well.
That's true. Yeah.
Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. I think psychology bleeds everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what I studied. I think when I got into uni, I was like, probably should get plugged into some Christian community because that would be good. And so I knew campus Bible study was there. I actually didn't get as involved with that ministry as much as I did with another ministry called Compassion Australia, who basically is a child sponsorship organization doing in the name of Jesus. And I don't know why, but that was where the actual community for me was built in terms of Christians. I guess we had a common purpose or a common reason to come together, which is Jesus, but also a common purpose, a passion, which was child sponsorship and making sure that, there was a community in different underdeveloped areas that could be funded. So churches that actually looked out for families, but also helped in raising kids that were not as privileged. So I think I got stuck more into that and found lots of good Christian friends in that community as well. I was still involved with CBS, but I think not as much as if I could go back, would have done.
Yeah.
Because I was working part-time whilst I was doing uni, a lot of it was how much can I cram all my subjects into a few days so that I could be working the other days. Yeah. So, that's a little bit about uni.
How did the double degree go?
It was good. I don't think, I think it's just length of time you spend at uni. So I spent 4.5 years at uni. Yeah. If I did just the one degree, I would have only spent 3.
Yeah.
So I think I liked it. I enjoyed the fact that I could context switch. So I wouldn't be talking about numbers all day because I would be talking about, monkey experiments in another class, So it was good to just get your mind off, monkey experiments or numbers every once in a while. So I did them both together. I didn't do one after the other. I just did them together. So I just have 2 subjects of psychology and 2 subjects of finance. And I think it was great. Good. I loved it.
So when you're in
put the calculator away, time to go torture some monkeys. Let's go
or run some experiments.
Yeah, or on the other side, it's when you turn up in all the uptight bean counters in accounting and you're look at these monkeys. Let's do an experiment on them.
One degree was more interesting than the other, I'll put it that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Finance was more interesting.
No, the other way. Definitely the other way.
What would be your favourite thing about finance though, that you like learning about?
I think it's just really practical.
Yeah. Okay.
You get taught about how an economy runs, and it goes down to the level of personal finance as well, how to just manage money, which I think is just super practical. So I think I really enjoyed the practical aspect of finance.
part of it?
The black and white part of it, 100%. Yeah. But I've always been interested in like human behavior as well. So that's where the psychology part came out of it. And because psychology has some science base, like they make conclusions based on experiments.
Yeah.
There was also some black and white, even though it's never fully black and white in psychology.
Does that mean that, do you think that economics would have been one that you would be really interested in because it kind of combines both?
Yes, to some extent. So economics is super practical, but then it goes really theoretical. I don't know if, you guys...
To a degree.
To a degree, right? It goes super theoretical. And I'm like, this is just beyond the practical realm. So then...
Kind of like, why are you bothering to do this? Is that what you mean?
Pretty much. Like they'd run like models and theories and I'm like, okay, well, this kind of economy will never exist. So like it's great to like think about it and discuss it, but let's be real, right? And that's why I majored in finance and not economics, because finance is, it's very practical.
The numbers.
The numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers. Yeah.
Numbers. Yeah, okay. So when did you go to Canada? Was that during?
Yeah, it was during university. I think it was my 3rd year of uni. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know where it's come from, but I've always wanted to visit Canada, live in Canada.
Yeah.
Just heard so many good things about Canada, how Canadians are so nice, just a whole bunch of things. So I don't know where it comes from, but I've always had this like irk to go to Canada. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, you know, what's the way I can do that whilst not disrupting my timeline of things, which is just to finish uni and get out of there and get a job. And so I decided, why not just try to go on exchange to Canada? Because that's a good way to like live there for a good period of time, but also be studying still and have that count towards my degree. Yeah. And so, that's what led me to do some time in Canada as an exchange student.
Awesome.
Really good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would live there.
Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah.
Did you go to the hockey?
The hockey. Yeah. Our
London
university.
Knights?
Sorry?
No? London Knights? I think that's the London team. Anyway,
it might have been actually hosted at the university there. Because
sounds like one of the bands that Braden likes, London Knights.
London Knights, I think, are the feeder team for one of the Ontario teams.
What are the Ontario NHL teams?
Oh, there's so many Canadian teams. Oh, I don't know.
Call yourself a fan.
Yeah.
I'm Detroit Red Wings, bro. Anyway.
Detroit.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is not even Canada.
It's just across the river.
It is.
Toronto. Anyway.
It is. Our university actually had an ice rink where they had like hockey matches, ice hockey matches. So it was really cool.
So you went to them a fair bit, obviously.
Yeah, no, they had it open for students to come all the time. It was pretty much like London itself is just a student city. Like there's nothing else there except that university, but people come in to study there.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of things happened at the university where I was just like, great, I'm a student, I get to go.
Okay.
So it was really good, really cool time.
And did the finance and psychology transfer over to that?
I did mostly psychology subjects there.
Yep.
Super interesting. I did like one subject on like drugs and behavior.
Ooh.
Or eating psychology, which was another
the
interesting
poutine,
one.
obviously.
The poutine.
Just give them poutine.
I ate a lot of poutine whilst I was there. I'm not gonna lie.
I can tell.
I'm not gonna lie. I did mostly psych subjects there.
Did you find a church over there?
I did. So interestingly, I lived in a like a host family's place.
Cool.
And I didn't intentionally look for like a Christian host family or anything like that. But the day I landed was a Saturday. And I remember, I'm like, this is where God's really good. Because I remember chatting to my pastor at the time, and he was saying, make sure you get plugged into a church early, because if you don't do it early, it kind of just like slips off and then you probably don't end up doing it. So that was in my mind. But I landed on a Saturday and I remember the Sunday morning, like the host family mum was like, we're going to church. Like, you want to come? And I was like, no way. Like, God's so good. And so I got plugged into a church called North Park Community Church, which I stayed for the rest of my time there. Yeah. And was like just really solid.
That's so good that you just got straight
so
into
good.
it.
Straight into it.
Didn't have to look for one or
anything.
Oh, that's really lovely.
Yeah. And so I made some really good friends from that church as well, who I stay in contact with as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, sweet. And so what was the best thing about going to Canada?
The best thing about going to Canada, I think,
Not the poutine.
not the poutine.
That's gross.
Yeah, along the lines of like just how I am, I guess. I was thinking before I left, I'm going to another country. Nobody knows me. I could really just be whoever I want. And so from a faith perspective, it was actually a really shaping time for me because I could be whoever I want, right? And so what am I going to be like when no one knows me here?
Yeah.
Right? What's that going to look like? And so I was thinking about that. And the cool thing was like getting there, not knowing anyone and having to like build like a friendship group again, who you see regularly, your church community and all that stuff. And I kind of found out like, oh, I'm kind of like how I was back in Sydney, which was, I know it sounds weird, but for me, it was like a reassuring thing. Okay, this is how I am. Yeah. Will I still prioritize God? Will I still do all of those things? Like I had questions in my head whether I would still do that. And when I did, it was kind of like, oh, like I had moments of God's really looking after me.
Yeah.
And, you know, even small things like just getting plugged into church because my host family is going, like, I'm like, God's really looking after me here. And I think it was a really sweet time of just depending on God because I didn't have the people around me that normally, you know, are my support system there. But also, I mean, that's from the faith perspective and just like my personal journey being away from home. But just Canada's just amazing. Like the scenery there, I don't know, I always plug the Rocky Mountains. Best place I have seen so far. Right. Just amazing scenery. Canadians are as nice as people say. Like you'd just be walking on the street looking slightly lost in a city like Toronto. Yeah. People would just be like, do you need help? Do you need, you know, how can I help you find your way? Yeah, so I just had a really, really sweet time, good time.
Have you been back?
I haven't been back since. It's on my list of stuff to do and just like catching up with all those friends that I made whilst I was there. Yeah, the pandemic didn't help as well because at one point I was like, maybe I'll go back to like work there for a bit. But when the pandemic hit, it just kind of fell off the cards as a priority. Yeah. But yeah, pandemic also meant that I came to Soul Revival. So.
Whoops.
Okay. I'm just going to put a pin in that though. Just what happened? I just want to ask you first though. What happened after uni?
What happened after uni?
Yeah. So what was your plan? What did you plan to do?
Yeah. Right after uni, I jumped straight into work. So I got into a graduate program at Telstra, and just basically started working right away.
What were you doing? Answering the phone?
No. Surprisingly not.
Making phone calls.
No. As a graduate, their program is really cool because what they do is they give you 18 months to explore. And so I got to jump into 4 teams throughout the 18-month period, and you could pick where you wanted to spend your time. Wow. So for me, this was great because I'm like, I don't know what I want to do after uni. I just want to try different things. So I did like a whole bunch of stuff. I started in like a finance department and I was quickly like, nope, this is not where I want to roll off. And then they actually sent me to the Philippines to work for 6 months as well, like expenses paid too, which was really fun. And it was such a good opportunity. So then I was spending some time in their contact center. So yes, not answering the calls, but working with the contact agents, just like working with what programs we should be running, and things like that. Then I came back and did some work in product management, which has also kind of led me to where I am now. And then the last one was in digital. So working with the digital team on Telstra.com, the app, and a whole bunch of stuff there. And then after that, I was like, okay, now I have to actually pick a real job at Telstra. And what am I going to pick? And I just love digital so much. So I stayed there for a bit. And then COVID hit and I moved to Woolworths. I decided to move to Woolworths because I was like, I've spent 4 years here. I think I want to try something new. Yeah. At that time, I was also thinking, do I want to get back into psychology? Decided I want to try another company before I make a move, if I was to make a move. Right. Yeah. So moved to Woolies and kind of explains where I am now.
Yeah. And what are you doing at Woolies?
Right now, I'm looking after the gift cards business. So giftcards.woolworths.com.au. Buy a gift card, guys.
For your gift card needs.
Plug. buy a gift card online. Yeah, so that's where I am now.
And we were kind of having a discussion about, like, prior to recording, about gift cards and how there's a certain group of people that will like try and game the gift card system so they can get more value out of it.
Yeah.
Do you meet many of those people around that, like, they want to engage you in that discussion, or do you just, like, when they ask you about gift cards, like, oh yeah, gift cards?
I think I get a mix of responses, but I'm one of those people that like to game the system. So
give us your hottest tip. Or can you do that because of your job?
I can. Look, if you have anyone in your life that is willing to share their senior, like New South Wales senior card with you.
Greaves?
Greaves, I'm talking to you tonight.
Oh dear. They get 5% off. So that will be better than any deal we ever put out there.
So if you bought a $100 gift card, if you use a senior skin, you get 95.
This is why we're all age, all stage.
All age, all stage for the gift cards.
Yes. Right. If you want to be super nifty about it, sometimes at Coles, they do this like prepaid MasterCard.
Competitor analysis, prepaid MasterCard. Yep.
Prepaid MasterCard. So basically you can spend that card anywhere because it's just a Visa card or MasterCard. Sometimes that goes on sale. And so you can buy that and then buy the gift card with that MasterCard. So you've got a discount on that. About. And then you get another discount on the gift card.
Wow.
And then you go into shop and buy something that's on special, right? So you've pretty much like triple dipped.
Oh, goodness me.
Man.
That's very... Not illegal either.
Not illegal, completely legal.
This is why there's like people that do this with like frequent flyer points and all that kind of thing too. Yeah. Like my dad's a bit like that.
Don't get me started.
I don't know.
I will get you started. Come on, tell us. Did you do the same thing with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Because there's like... What do they call them?
You just like cycle through credit cards.
Isn't there a name for people that do this? I can't remember what it is.
Is there a name?
Yeah, I've read it.
I refuse to have a label.
Well, you did. You did mention that when you came to Soul Revival. How did that happen? Did you know like Grace and Ian? Or was it you just kind of fell into it? Like you've said a few things you've fallen into.
I know Grace from City Bible Forum, so I'm involved with the Young Workers Program there. So I knew Grace. Some of you guys would have met Bethany as well, who I've met through City Bible Forum as well. And so I knew those two, and I didn't know Ian or Michelle really at that point in time.
For the uneducated, what is City Bible Forum?
I was going to ask that too, yeah.
Yeah, City Bible Forum's an organisation that basically pulls together the worker network in all over Sydney and actually in all over the country actually. And they think about how to share the gospel in the workplace. Yeah.
And what do you gain from being part of City Bible Forum?
So I'm involved with the Young Workers Program, which is called Head Start. When I started work, I was kind of like, just like when you enter uni, I was looking for like a Christian community. When I started work, I was also looking for that. And I don't think there's many that are around, but somebody, a friend at university right before I graduated told me about Head Start and City Bible Forum. And he was like, you should get plugged into that community when you start work because it's like a whole nother season of change and just figuring out how do I live as a Christian in the workplace was a question I had in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I went to check out Head Start and they talk about all sorts of things that are workplace specific, you know, office politics, how do you deal with money? Because as a uni student, you're poor and then suddenly you're working, you're like, what do I do with all this money?
Especially if you've done finance and psychology.
Not really. As a graduate, you get paid peanuts. But yes, I benefited a lot from just having a community where we were just like-minded in thinking about how are we to behave as Christians in the workplace? How do we navigate all these challenging things? What does evangelism look like in the workplace? And so that again is another community where I've just benefited heaps from people who have already 5 steps ahead of me, giving me some advice to just thinking through difficult topics that you just don't know how to think through. Because I think church does touch on some of these topics, but it's not talked about as much. For example, like office politics, you wouldn't really have like a sermon about that at church because,
I'm preaching on Saturday.
Oh, latest,
Office politics?
Yeah, you're going to bring that up.
Yeah, that's going to be the theme.
Yeah, bring
in
it up.
Advent.
Sure.
All right, we'll be. I'm taking your word for that.
I'll write it in now.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think just benefited a lot from the community there,
Yeah.
and just people who are thinking about the same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's kind of similar to what you were saying about youth group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Similar thing.
yeah, for sure.
It's really cool because work's such like a massive part of people's lives, and like it's where you're going to spend a majority of your week. It's cool that you can have that like thoughtfulness put into how you're going to approach it.
Yeah.
What do you what's your experience as being a Christian in the workplace then?
I think it can be challenging for sure, because there's I think and the more experience you have, the more you kind of move up the rank, and the more you move up the rank, the more political things happen, and the harder it is to kind of keep integrity sometimes. So I think that's probably the most challenging part. But having said that, I don't think like having chat to other workers as well, I think I've had a really good experience so far, because I've had moments where I could share about my faith and have really good discussions. And I've actually made some really good friends, particularly when I was in Telstra, that I still chat to today, and we have really good discussions about, you know, just life things. So we're able to just dive deeper beyond work, talk about like family, talk about what do you actually believe. Some of them have visited church before as well. And so I think generally speaking, I've had quite a positive experience. Like I haven't really, in my head anyway, I always feel like there might be someone really hostile out there that's just like, you believe in Jesus, like you're crazy, or say something super rude or just really ignorant. But I actually haven't come across anybody who's like that when I share that I'm a Christian, or they know that I go to church. If anything, it's always been like a neutral response, or, you know, like they just kind of don't want to talk about it and they move on, or they actually engage and ask more questions, or they say, oh, I also go to church, and which that becomes a really cool thing to just go down. So I think it's been positive. Yeah. But I don't know if it's because I've kind of like developed that mindset because I've had such a good community around me, because I think it can be tough to be doing that by yourself, and it's tough to think about how can I be sharing about Jesus if you feel like you're doing that by yourself, or you can't share difficulties with other workers. So yeah, I think generally positive.
Do you get that thing like when someone makes a joke and then they're like, oh, I know Louisa's a Christian, like, and they go, oh, I better not say that or something? Because I've had that a few times.
Yeah. I think I've, not in the workplace, but I have that with friends
really?
Where they're like, maybe we shouldn't joke about that. And I'm like, I mean, that's probably true. You probably shouldn't joke about that, but
not on account of me, kind of thing. You're like,
in general,
like,
in general.
You're like, okay, it's But
Yeah.
it's interesting that they already have that in their mind when
It is
like they know that you're a Christian.
Yeah, I think they kind of accidentally joke about it, and then the second thought is, wait a second, did I offend anyone?
Yeah. Did I offend her?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We kind of like went on a tangent and didn't talk about how you started a Sorrow Bible Church. But I thought of another question though. Yeah. We've talked a lot about like what you did, where you went, what you like. What do you actually like doing outside of work? And like, what are you interested in?
I love traveling a lot. The pandemic hasn't really helped, but it's just so good for life perspective, and also just to have some time spent away from your actual regular routine. So I really love traveling. I also really love adrenaline activities.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Like skydiving and stuff.
Skydiving, anything that's like land related. So
okay.
I actually just came back from New Zealand, and there were some adrenaline activities like whitewater rafting where I'm like, one and done, like not again.
Oh, you don't want to do that again?
But I think like water activities are just like, I don't know, I have a little bit of reservation because I just don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to hit my head on a rock? What's in the water? Like, I don't know. But skydiving, anything that has speed. So go-karting.
They're right over your alley.
Yeah, anything that's fast or high. Paragliding, like all of that stuff.
I'm not a big heights person.
What's the best adrenaline activity you've ever done then?
Oh, skydiving's pretty good.
Okay.
Skydiving's Actually so fun. I did the big like swing in New Zealand recently, which is where they do the bungee and the
have you done
catapult.
bungee jumping?
That's the one thing I'm not going to do.
Oh.
And the reason might disturb you a little. I've heard from optometrist friends that your eye can actually like rip from the socket.
Oh.
So when you go down and you come back up, like that jolt.
We'll have to get
up.
you to talk to Anthony Sell. He had done, I'm pretty sure he said he's
done several times.
He's done the craziest ones.
Yeah.
And he did it backwards.
Yeah.
And then he did one where it was so large. It's like the longest one you can do, wasn't it? And
Something
there was
like
like
that.
2 things.
Wow.
He sounds pretty good.
He's got some googly eyes.
Yeah. I feel like
Not really, Anthony.
you can pop your eyeball out sneezing. So I feel like
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
live a little, it's fine.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you have these things of like, I don't want to go whitewater rafting, but I love adrenaline activities.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
You've got like these reservation things, but I
Yeah.
still want to do that stuff.
It's funny because like the friend I went with to New Zealand, she's like the same, but she gets her adrenaline kick out of water activities and she hates the land ones. So we had to like compromise what activities we were doing in New Zealand. They were all like adrenaline pumped, but
Yeah.
half of it was like adrenaline that I didn't want and half of it was like adrenaline she didn't want.
You
It
need
was
to do
really
like
funny.
amphibious adrenaline activities.
Land, sea, or air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to like be in the Marines or something to actually
Yeah,
do
for
that.
sure. For sure.
Well, that's cool. But okay, so now let's finally get back to it. How did you end up becoming part of Soul Revival?
Yeah, it's always a funny story because wasn't exactly planned. So during the pandemic, I'm sure you guys would have heard a little bit like bits and pieces of story from Grace and maybe Wang as well. But during 2020, we were all in lockdown. At that time, I was still going to my old church, but Bethany, a friend of mine, was like, "Hey, you should come." Like, 'cause she had told me about this group that they wanted to start called Bible Chats, where they bring in non-Christians who are willing to engage with the word but didn't want to go to church. And she was like, "Hey, you should just come visit, like, and just support and give us some feedback on, you know, how you think the group's going." And this was during like lockdown, so it was on Zoom. I'm like, "Yeah, I got nothing to do on Saturday. We're all like stuck in our houses anyway, so why not?" Interestingly, that was the same week that Wang visited, and also Iris and Charlie, who you guys might know as well. We all joined on that same
On the
day
same one.
to visit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so popped in and I was like, this is really cool. Like people are engaging with God's word on Zoom. And it was really cool. And so I was like, okay, like cool to visit. But because the lockdown actually went for a while, I just kept popping in because there was nothing better to do on Saturday. Like might as well read some Bible with some friends. Mm-hmm. So I kept attending that. And then when the lockdown lifted, they were like, oh, we should meet in person, like in Grace and Michelle's lounge room. And I was like, you know what? I've like met these people on Zoom now, so I might as well meet them in person for a bit.
Yeah.
So I went and it just became like a thing that I just continued to go to because it was just so wholesome, you know, it was just so wholesome. And I had church on Sunday, so it didn't really conflict with anything. And then fast forward to, I think, November or October, we started thinking about like where this group was going to go because for some of us, like Ian, myself, Wang, we were going to another church, but also now Saturdays is like Bible chat. So like, where do we have our weekend to do life admin and hang out with friends? Like, we can't do this forever. And then at the same time, we were thinking about, should this become a church plant? So I think all of that started coming together. And then I ultimately at the end decided, why not? You know, like, why not be a part of this? Soul Revival seems really cool. And non-Christians are hearing about God's word. So why not get stuck into it? I mean, at the end of the day, if this doesn't end up being anything, like our churches will still be there. Yeah. There's, you know, and big picture, just why not try something? So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up getting involved.
Was the idea of planning a church a little bit daunting for you or not really?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I talked about my church in Eastwood. They actually planted a church in Chatswood whilst I was with them. Yeah. And I was part of that as well. And I would say like that period of time, I think it was maybe 4 years where we tried to do that, 3 or 4 years. But that was really challenging. It was really challenging on many fronts. And there was a lot of things that I learnt from that time where I was like, there's definitely a better way to do this. Like but we were experimenting, right?
Yeah.
So when the idea of church planting came up again, I was like, I have some reservations about this. And so a big thing for me in terms of like saying yes was the fact that we were doing it with you guys, which meant that we had like support from a church that had already established itself. It's already done some church planting. It's got resources. It's got like knowledge and experience, and it's a solid community. That was a big reason why I said yes. If we were to do it on our own, I told the rest of the team, I'm like, I'm out. Like if we're not doing it with Soul Revival, I'm out, because I've seen just how tough it can be, and it's just really hard.
Did that other one that you were talking about from Eastwood, did they go out on their own without any support?
So without going too much into politics,
sure,
like we did it with the other church, but it was the way it kind of like operated, it felt like it was done on its own. So there wasn't too much support. Like one thing that I really appreciate about doing it with Soul Revival is we're up in Ryde, but you guys are like willing to send people over to help out where necessary, and like vice versa.
Yeah, you guys are also really willing to come here as well.
Yeah, that culture's there, right? But for my other like church planting experience, it was more just like you guys are now like the Chatswood, church, and there was less of like sending resourcing support or even people support. I don't know if there was things happening in the background, but there was less of that. And for us, we kind of, everybody that went to do the church plant was like maybe 20 to 30 of us, but they were all young people, like people in like young workers and younger. So you can imagine there would have been financial stress.
Not a huge amount of experience there.
Exactly. Experience. And then like people just doing music or doing, random different things, but like everyone was really young. It was hard, but I think the good thing about it was a lot of young people stepped up because they had to. So there was definitely God working in that as well, but it was, I'll say it was hard.
Yeah.
And so, I was quite firm on not doing it ourselves if we were to become a church plant. And so doing it with Soul Revival, I was like, yes, like this will be good. And so I spent a lot of time like observing you guys and just being like, do I want to be part of this?
Yeah.
But I'm here, so you guys know how that decision went.
That's all right. Did you have a question then? Sorry.
No.
Oh, I thought you did. Final question then, before we wrap up the chips.
Sure.
We've heard about a lot of interesting things throughout your life. What do you wish you knew as a younger Christian that you know now?
Yeah, I think if I was to say something to my younger self, it would just be to like ask questions early. Because I think I spent a lot of time deliberating in my own head, lots of different things. And I wish I just had like spoken to people earlier, asked questions earlier.
Just like you could move, like make some progress on it?
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time in my own head thinking about different things. And it's good to think, but you can only get so far.
You got to bounce
by
those
yourself.
Thoughts off other people and stuff.
Yeah, and just leaning into like the wisdom of older people earlier, because I think I tried to keep it all to myself for a while until I realized, wait a second, this is like super helpful to like ask my youth leader or my youth pastor. So I tell myself to do that. I think the other thing is just, I think accepting and understanding God's grace and mercy is actually quite a difficult concept to grasp, because taking God aside, when you just observe everything that's happening in society, it's like nothing's free. Like nothing is that good, So for me, I think like accepting that God just loves you unconditionally is just, that was a journey on its own. But I don't know if I could tell myself anything different when I was younger, but I think grasping that concept changes everything. Like you can understand that there's a God and conceptually in your head understand Jesus died for you. But I think understanding that God, you know, is a forgiving God, is a God that loves you no matter what you do, is just, that's just game changer. Like it just frees you up to do life freely. Yeah, so I think if I could grasp that earlier, I really wish, you know, I did.
Yeah.
But I think it's a journey for everyone to.
Yeah, we all go
get
through
there.
that journey.
100%.
Like God makes us do that for a reason, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, I was just thinking though, it's funny how you said that, ask questions early, because I mean, there's quite a few of the things that we've talked about today is that, you know, you talk about how you were rather black and white, and then you started to kind of ease off on that a little bit. But how many new experiences you decided to take on throughout your life now, like going to Canada, adrenaline activities, starting a new church, like all those kind of things is really interesting from when you were saying you were very black and white when you thought you were first grow up. So I thought that was really encouraging. So thank you very much. Have any final words, Braden, before we...
No, it's been really encouraging to get to talk to you, Louisa. I
really,
always like
really
getting
nice
to talk about youth group as well.
Yeah, that's
fun.
really cool. Yeah, I think at least we know who's going to be in charge of youth at Ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Louisa.
Have you interviewed the other people in the...
Some of them. We've had... From Ride, you mean?
Yeah.
We've had Grace, Wang,
Joey.
Is that it so far? We're working on it. We're going to get them, get everyone there.
Yeah, soon. I have to get Gerald, Michelle.
Oh, Gerald would be a great one. Yep.
Be very fun.
Why do you think that? So is there others that are going to take your job?
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like I'm sure the others have had youth experience, so...
We've got to do ministry as a team.
100%.
With Louisa at the top. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really good. It's been really fun. It's been really nice. And again, it's just always lovely to hear different stories from different people with different perspectives, but all under one thing of Jesus. So thank you so much.
Sure.
It's time to wrap up the chips, and we always finish every episode with a one way. So shall we do that?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
One way.
One way.